Pentacle witch.
Welcome, witches, to the Broken Pentacle podcast. This is a space for those who weave their path beneath upside-down skies, where the stars tell different stories and the magic has teeth. We're your hosts, Alvine and Avalon, two witches who have weaved our magic beneath southern skies for decades. Now, today, our beautiful witches, we are talking about quite a heavy subject. We are going to be getting into the witch trials. We've got a lot to discuss with you today, and we want to hear back from you as well. This is going to be a community conversation. But before we get started, we just want to encourage you to light a little incense, burn a little something, get the energy of your space feeling good, because this is a heavy, intense subject. So we want to be working our magic throughout this, not letting any of that stuff affect us as we move through this. Now, the first thing I just want to share with you guys is a short poem that I have written to the fallen witches. They came with ropes and torches bright to hunt the whisperers of the night, to silence hands that healed with herbs, to break the hearts that spoke in verbs. Too wild, too soft, too free, too wise, they feared the moonlight in their eyes. They burned the mothers, daughters, wives, the ones who kindled hidden lives. They drowned the wise, the midwife's hand, and salted every inch of land. For some were witches, but most were not. Their crimes imagined, sins forgot. Most prayed to Christ, not horned or fey, but still the fire took them away. And so we call their names in tears, for innocence lost through bloody years. We honor you, both witch and kin, all hearts condemned for the truth within. For every voice struck down by dark, we tend the flame and relight the spark. Your courage breathes in every breath, a quiet defiance outlasting death. Now, to begin, we're going to do our segments first. So the first thing we want to chat with you guys about is our Witch's Apothecary, Elixir Herb, Stone and Bone. As you guys know, we have been working with frankincense and fluorite. So this is our herb and our crystal, and we have a lot to share with you. So I'll open us up here. I have been burning frankincense religiously for the last few weeks. And I've made myself a blend. So we worked with hyssop earlier, as you guys know. And so I've got this 3-ingredient blend that I'm really loving at the moment. So frankincense, hyssop, and eucalyptus. And it's just like such a powerhouse cleanser. And I'm burning that every morning throughout the day. And it's been absolutely amazing. So I feel like there's actually been like a 2-tier kind of thing going on. Like fluorite and frankincense have both really been helping me to gain clarity, to clear out the old. I feel like I'm in such a state of renewal right now. And obviously, at the time of filming this, we're also in spring in the Southern Hemisphere, so that tracks, right? Fluorite, the way I've been using this, I've been using it to help me with my work. So as I mentioned to you guys, I've had it here on my desk. And I've noticed on the days that I'm really struggling and I go to fluorite, it helps. Like, it's actually insane that I can lift myself from the mental fog into, it's not like maybe like the clearest whatever, but like it's a shift. It's a noticeable shift. It's amazing. So I've been holding this at my brow, got that idea from Avalon. And I've actually been in the mornings as part of my daily magic. I've been grounding with these crystals as well. So I do my grounding exercise with the tourmaline down at my feet, and then I actually lay back on the ground, and then I just rest the fluorite. And I'll just lay in meditation for however long I feel like, maybe 30 seconds, maybe several minutes. And it's just been the most amazing way to start the day. So tell us all about your frankincense and fluorite, Avalon.
I have been going hard with frankincense because it is a beloved holy herb of mine. I have bought it in bulk for the last probably 17 years. I buy it in 2 to 3 kilo bags because I use a lot of it. Nothing is more purifying, eradicating, and effective, I feel. Like it is the base of pretty much all of my incenses, my loose mix incenses. And so just being really dedicated to work with it. Like I have worked with it in its resin form on coal this whole time. I do have frankincense oil, but I haven't reached for frankincense oil. I don't have it with me here where I'm staying at the moment. Anyway, but I bought, this was half full. This is what I've got left. Like this was to here.
How long ago?
I got here a week ago.
So just for anyone who's not watching, it's probably 5 or 6 handfuls, I would say, gone of frankincense.
Yeah. Yeah. I light a charcoal disc in the morning and I light one again in the afternoon and I cleanse. And I was saying to Alvine before I started this podcast that I was burning it last night. Like I'd burned it the night prior and I got my kids up and I smoke cleansed them all. And it just felt right. I like to do that at least once a month. And my son's up and he opens up his eye. He knows exactly what to do. So he's old hat at it. But yesterday he was in a bit of what I'd like to call a moody mood kind of vibe. And he's perked up his little nose. What's that smell? He says. And I say, it's frankincense. And he smells weird. And I said, it's the same thing that I've been burning all week. And he's just, yeah, I know. I just didn't want to tell you I didn't like it. And I'm like, it's to eradicate demons from my life. So I bet you don't like it, you little. We both had a good chuckle because, of course, I'm not being serious here. But my daughter got in on the joke and it was really funny. And it just goes to show that even in that moment, like we were all laughing around the smoke. Like we were all standing around the smoke, absolutely killing ourselves laughing. My son couldn't breathe. He's got tears running down his face because we were just having this funny little joke about frankincense while it's burning. And just removing the unwanted and the bad and the stripping the place of all of that static kind of heavy energy that can sometimes happen. I think the one thing that I will say is I'm Brazilian, so family is really important to me. But the concept of family is a very heavy one. And I do believe that wherever there is heavy family issues or just family in general, even if it's not heavy family, frankincense will be your friend. It just helps to like remove and facilitate the removal of things that may be stuck or blocked. The thing that you never said, the thing that you didn't want to bring up that because of fear or whatever, gets in there and it sweeps it all clean. It's such a nurturing resin in itself, but it can be very stripping as well, but not stripping in an aggressive way. It just comes through and like scrapes the debris. It's like a duster, actually. It's so feather light. So it's good at lifting and moving things. And it is a holy herb. And I say that in a Catholic sense as much as I say that in a witch sense. It is a holy herb. It is the one herb that I would recommend anyone to create sacred space. If you have nothing else, frankincense on coal will create the most delicious sacred space. You can burn frankincense, you can cool the corners, you can burn frankincense, you can cleanse your candles or prime your candles, you can waft your phone in the smoke of frankincense, waft your crystals in the smoke of frankincense, your tarot decks in the smoke of frankincense. It is that herb, that number one herb that you would just get in there and really put to good use. So one of my top 10 witchy herbs, my top 10, without a doubt. It would be in my repertoire every day of the week.
Absolutely.
And as for fluorite, I've done a lot of writing. I've been doing a lot of writing and a lot of researching for writing as well, not just for this podcast, which we've done. By the way, we've done an inordinate amount of research.
Quite a bit.
We had, I think it was a 6-hour study session. You and I had a 6-hour study session, didn't we? It was about 6 hours. It was a long time.
It was all day for sure. Yeah.
It was all day. And so beyond that, I've been really studying and looking into different facets for my writing work that I'm doing at the moment, and also for the writing of my Bonestone Oracle guidebook. And so there have been times where the flow has been hard to find. Like I'm a person that needs to work in flow. I'm neurodivergent. And so if I don't have flow, my brain forks out in different directions. Like I've got a foot in each realm kind of vibe.
Mm.
But when I can manage to like really bring that into a sense of alignment, I can hyper fixate, then hyper focus. And that's exactly the state that I need. And so I rub my crystal on my forehead. Sometimes I use the green side, sometimes I use the light side. And I breathe really deeply, and I breathe really deeply. And eventually, and I'll hold it. I'll be typing and I'll be reading and I'll be holding it. And I'm getting it. I'm getting it. I'm getting it. Like the mind is there. It's present. It's alive. It's not like I've created that sense of alignment with this crystal, but I can focus through the haze with this crystal. That's for damn sure. So for a neurodivergent person, now let me be clear here. I prepared this stone specifically for the attainment of that focus. So fluorite has a few qualities. I've specifically used it as a clarifying tool for research and writing and mental pursuits, full stop, right? When I consecrated the crystal and I prepared it, that was the intention that I used. So if that is something that you want to use when you go to prepare your crystal, to cleanse it, to consecrate it, to dedicate the stone for use, make sure you're clear with that dedication. That's all I'll say.
Fabulous tip. And now we've got our witch's work table, finds, fails, and field notes. So for this week, I thought I would give you a little bit of an update, I suppose some field notes on my friendship spell that you guys know that I was working. So I made a little friendship wreath and spoke about that, I don't know how many episodes ago, but a few. And it's been interesting to see it working. So it most definitely is. I have actually not had a completely free weekend since the start of September because there's always things happening now, but it's working in a really interesting way. I had my particular thoughts about what it is that I want to manifest, let's put it that way, but I'm being very open this time because I have been a little bit more stringent in manifesting people in the past. And I can see where my ego kind of tripped me up. I know that's not a lot of detail. I hope that makes some sense. So what I'm doing now, because I think magic is a balance, is a dance at times between action and pushing for and surrendering and aligning with, that kind of thing. So I feel like this is a surrender aligning kind of situation. Anyway, so I've left it a little bit open and it's been really interesting to see how it's working. So there's been a lot of old connections revitalize, which was really interesting. One in particular I found interesting because at the start of the year, I had decided this particular person was going to be my person for the year. I was like, we're going to hang out. We're going to become BFFs. This is going to be great. She was dating someone in the family and then they broke up. So at the time that I was clearing my life, this happened where I was like, don't worry, we've got a friend. And then no, she's gone too. But what was really interesting is she's popped back up again now that I've cast this spell. Now, she was already, they haven't got back together because of me or anything like that. They were already doing their thing, but she has come back into my life at this time. And there's been some other connections as well, which are just making themselves known again. So it's been interesting. I don't feel as if like the spell's manifested. Like I feel very much that it's weaving.
It's trying.
That's right. It's where we're moving into that space. But anyway, I thought I would give you that update. I thought, again, it was going to manifest whole new people. But to begin with, the foundation of who I already have is those connections are being made again. So that's really cool. Anyway, so I wanted to update you on that. And in terms of finds, oh my God, you guys, I haven't brought anything home, but this season, I'm just loving walking around my neighborhood and just locating the different plants. So I do this every year. I like to know where different things are. And I've got a pretty steady base, let's say, of the different plants that I will go for. Olive here and wisteria here and rose there and whatever. But it's always fun in spring because you get new flowers and plants that have moved spots or things that I haven't recognized before. Every year my herbal knowledge is growing. So I'm just loving being all about the blooms. So the green and the yellow of Australia's beginning of spring is moving now into just a riot of color, purples and reds and oranges. Oh, there's so many orange, gorgeous flowers around here. So anyway, I'm looking at all of these and I probably will need to do some floral wild crafting soon, I think, which I actually do feel a little bit inspired by because Avalon has also been sharing her flower finds with me. Anyway, what have you got this week for us for the witch's work table, Avalon?
I just wanted to comment on your wreath spell, your friendship wreath spell. The thing I saw when you said that is that because it's a wreath, it's like it likes to go around in a circle and it likes to fluff everything up, like just to get it. It's like tilling the soil kind of vibe. And so I think you're going to find a lot of activation there, but it's going to be a very cyclical thing. You're going to find new people coming in, new people coming out, because that's the nature of friendships as well. I have beautiful friends all over the world, and we've lived close to each other, then they've moved elsewhere and sort of stuff, but they're still in my life. It's that kind of cyclical, beautiful thing. Yeah, I like that. I like that. And it's given me an idea because I've just recently been asked to be a bridesmaid for my best friend's wedding.
Congrats.
And so she said the right things to me, right? She says, my theme is going to be like magical woodland wardens theme. And I'm like,
amazing.
I accept your story. I will take up the mantle, right? But I have a grapevine on my property. And it's just starting to bud leaves and that kind of stuff. But I'm going to strip it because I needed to give it a bit of a clip before I started. But we are going to be creating little wreaths for her wedding as well. So same sort of vibe. So little project, little side project. But as far as like my own finds, fails, and field notes, start off with my fails. I have a gripe. This will come across as a little rant. At present, I am noticing the fast homogenization of both tarot and witchcraft. We will get into that another time, but I am really quite concerned about the spreading of misinformation in both modalities there. They're not even modalities, both paths, if you will. And just this fast leeching of sacredness that was always a very heady part of witchcraft to me. And I see this across social media. It's not specific to any one platform. So I feel like that's something that I notice is really failing at this moment in time, and it hurt my heart. I had a rant on Patreon about it. I wrote a blog post on my website about it, specifically tarot related. These were specifically tarot related. Anyway, but moving on to my field notes. I have notes, physical notes to read. So I found and harvested pale pink sorrel, right? So it's used for joy, playfulness, and banishing gloom. Strong connection to the divine feminine. It can be used to draw love to you. I also found long-stemmed poppy and blue iris. And so I'm drying my iris right now in my dehydrator, but the poppy freaked me out, okay? The poppy freaked me out for this reason. I have been this week stalked by the death card, and poppy is the symbol of death. It is associated to death magic. And I already had it in my dehydrator when I read the part that said, shouldn't bring it into your house. And I'm like, oh. So I just felt the truth in that. Usually I'm like, do I vibe with that? It was like wattle. Yeah. They say don't bring wattle inside the house. I'm like, bring wattle inside the house. It's a vibe. But I was like almost terrified. I was like, I've got to get this out of my house. So I had a brush with death. And I wanted to talk about the magical properties anyway. So magical properties of Iris. So Iris was named after the Greek goddess of rainbows.
Oh, I didn't know that.
How cute, eh? So Iris is the messenger between the gods and humanity. As such, its primary magical property is communication. Not just everyday talk, but communication with the divine, with spirits, with one's higher self, and with one's subconscious. Iris is a liminal tool helping to bridge the unconscious with the conscious, the physical with the spiritual realms, and the seen with the unseen realms. The deep blue-purple iris, which is what I have found, are aligned with the third eye and crown chakras. Fantastic for divination, dream work, third eye activation, and specifically more prominently used for communication, eloquence, public speaking, and artistic expression. It is also said I did some research on this. It's also said to draw soulmate love, faithfulness. It can soothe heartache, grief, and disappointment. And so there was a lot there. Some of that came from the Victorian flower language.
Language of flowers, same thing. Yeah.
That's the one. Yeah, that's the one. And then we've got Poppy. So Poppy was sleep, death, and eternal life. And I'm just like, get it out of my house. I like the fact that it was in the garden. It just popped up between pavers. Just popped up between pavers. So I'm just like, this is great. But on its own, it's great for honoring the fallen, ancestral communication, promoting peace associated with garden magic. And again, in big bright letters, should not bring red poppies into home. I feel very strongly about that one. And that's it. That brings me to my fail, which is the homogenization of witchcraft and tarot. Oh, what a vibe.
Which we'll discuss more in future, because you just really touched on it there. And I feel like some people are going to be like, oh, talk to us more about that.
Yeah,
Well.
we either cover it or I'll cover it or something will happen with it, because I have noticed, and it is very concerning. I think especially because news moves very fast, information is exchanged at a rapid rate now, and people are favoring more short content. What is it called? Short form. Oh, wow, today? Not the day.
Lavender, get your
Short form
lavender.
content. So I can understand how certain things can get lost in that time frame. But if people are speaking, I don't know, with awareness or critically or something along the lines of that, then more information can be explained in a shorter period of time. And then you can always easily send people to long form content thereafter, even if that long form content is your own, that kind of vibe. But I've just noticed it, and it's made me feel so helpless. And I hate feeling helpless. I hate that feeling of being helpless, because I know that the newer generation is coming in now, and they're curious about witchcraft. They're curious about tarot, about astrology, about all the beautiful woo things. And they're not getting fed intellectually as a result of that. Everything is so superficial. I've started to look at it as like a cheaper format of these very profound and expensive, I would say, practices.
Time expensive at the least, hey?
Yeah, time expensive, energy expensive. And so, yes, we will definitely get into it and talk about it. But right now, let's return our focus to witch hunts, witch trials. And I'm gonna hit you with some trigger warnings, because I think we need to. This will be the first episode. 10 is the first episode we hit you with some like trigger warnings. So trigger warnings today: graphic descriptions of torture and violence, physical and psychological abuse. We're talking about these very subjects: religious persecution and fanaticism, misogyny and gender-based violence, sexual violence and coercion, mentions of self-injury and suicide, psychological manipulation and gaslighting, injustice and judicial murder, suffering of marginalized figures, and mentions of harm to children and animals. And so we're going deep, y'all. We're going into it. We are going to be exploring a lot, and the subject that is today's focal point, which is the witch hunts, originally came out of, was birthed from, if you will, this kind of occurrence, this regular occurrence, I would say, that both Alvine and I, and also by extension, my beautiful Patreon book club, have noticed. Now, we recently, it came from reading The Crooked Path by Keldon. No shade to Keldon whatsoever. But in it, he mentioned specific witches of the witch trial persuasion, testimonials and practices that came from those confessional exchanges. And for many of us, that information triggered something inside each of us, because intellectually speaking, one can only imagine the circumstances that led these women to say what they said, and men as well, to say what they said, and the duress that they would have been placed under to produce this information. it breaks my heart to think about it, honestly. And my biggest concern in talking about this, and I was talking to Alvine about this prior, is that I will either be too insensitive on this subject, or I will not explain it as well as it needs to be. So please be patient with us. Give us a tiny bit of grace for this. We are going to do the best that we can, and we're going to move through this subject with the utmost consideration.
It's a very big topic and one that people have a lot of feelings about. And I think from what I've seen out there, we're going to be covering maybe a few different angles too, from what I've seen. So we'll see how that goes. But I'll let you guys know a few of the things we'll be exploring today are, of course, the witch hunts. And we're going to be looking at a couple or featuring a couple of persecuted witches. We're also going to be chatting about the difference between confession and testimony, because there is quite a difference there. And we're just getting into persecution being that really ugly side of human nature. And I think if we're looking out into the world, we can see that it is ramping up a little bit more than it has in the past in our Western countries specifically, because around the world it has continued. So that's what we are chatting about today. And we
Oh.
would ask as well. So we've, of course, done our research. As Avalon mentioned, we've spent hours on this already, but we've barely scratched the surface of what's out there. So if
Mhm.
you know of any really good education materials on this subject, we would love you guys to share those with the community. So if you would put those in the comments, share it on your social media, that would be incredible, because this is a very important topic. It is a part of our history. So it is important to know the lineage of the witches that we come from, if you will. So let's get into it.
Absolutely. All right. So, first of all, we are talking witch hunt and witch trials here. So, a witch hunt or a witch purge is a search for people who have been labeled witches, or a search for evidence of witchcraft. Practicing evil spells or incantations was prescribed and punishable in early human civilizations in the Middle East. In medieval Europe, witch hunts often arose in connection to charges of heresy from Catholics and Protestants. An intensive period of witch hunts occurred in early modern Europe and, to a smaller extent, colonial America. These took place from around 1450 to 1750, spanning the upheaval of the Counter-Reformation and the 30 Years' War, resulting in an estimated 35 to 60,000 executions. Now, again, this is all encompassing all over the world, and there are no fixed numbers for this. This we did discover. The last executions of people convicted as witches in Europe took place in the 18th century. In other regions like Africa, Asia, contemporary witch hunts have been reported from sub-Saharan Africa, Papua New Guinea, and official legislation against witchcraft is still found in Saudi Arabia, Cameroon, and South Africa today. So, in contemporary English, witch hunt metaphorically means an investigation that is usually conducted with much publicity, supposedly to uncover subversive activity, disloyalty, and so on, but with the real purpose of harming opponents. It can also involve elements of moral panic as well as mass hysteria. Reports on Indigenous practices in America, Asia, and Africa collected during early modern age of exploration have been taken to suggest that not just the belief in witchcraft, but also the periodic outbreak of witch hunts are a human cultural universal. This is a cited snippet of information. Wolfgang Berenger, 2004, Witches and Witch Hunts, A Global History by Wiley, page 50. If you want the ISBN, it'll be in our show notes on Substack. So this information we have shared. Okay. I don't mean to smile or get super excited, but wait till you say what I'm about to wait till you hear what I'm about to say next. Alvine and I, we came across this information. Maybe, Alvine, you should read it.
Sure. This is a fun one, you guys. So we have, are you ready for it? Werewolves witch trials. So these were witch trials that were combined with werewolf trials. So the belief in werewolves developed parallel to the belief in European witches in the course of the late Middle Ages and the early modern period. Like the witchcraft trials as a whole, the trial of supposed werewolves emerged in what is now Switzerland during the Valais witch trials in the early 15th century and spread throughout Europe in the 16th, peaking in the 17th, subsiding by the 18th century. So a long time. The persecution of werewolves and the associated folklore is an integral part of the witch hunt phenomenon, albeit a marginal one. Accusations of lycanthropy were involved in only a small fraction of the witchcraft trials.
Fascinating, yeah? Fascinating. Vibes.
So now we're going to explore a couple. I've just got a few here of the most notorious witches of the witch trials. So we want to introduce these ladies to you. So first we have Isobel Gowdie, who was a Scottish witch. So she was accused of, she made extensive witchcraft confessions in 1662. She gave 4 confessions over a span of about 6 weeks, which detailed pacts with the devil, meetings of covens, shape-shifting, fairy interactions, spells, curses, and more. Her confessions were unusually rich in detail, which is why she has become so notorious. So much more so than many other witch trial confessions. And her confession is interesting because it combines both demonic and fairy elements, which has actually intrigued historians for many years. We don't know for certain whether she was executed or survived. Scottish court records are a little bit murky around that. A few other details about her. Her confessions included interacting with the Queen and the King of Fairies, transforming into animals such as hares, cats, and elaborate demonology and magical rituals. And because of her detailed narratives, her case is often invoked in studies of witchcraft beliefs, ritual folklore, and as a kind of a really good example, right? She's one of the best examples of witches that we can pull from historically in this way. Her testimony is one of the richest surviving windows into the early modern witchcraft worldview. Now, our next witch, we have Bridget Bishop. So I'm sure many of you have heard of her. She is an American. She lived in 1632 until she was executed on the 10th of June, 1692. She was actually the first person to be executed in the Salem witch trials, which is part of why she is so popular and so well known. Now, this is really interesting because spectral evidence is the way that is the term. Spectral evidence was used against her. So this means that spirits or people seeing spirits or shapes, and that was the basis of their accusations against her. Okay, so it was like a spiritual thing. So witnesses claimed when Bishop looked at them that they would be struck down or that bits of clothing would be torn in the exact spot that she was looking at. There was a jury of women that originally claimed to find a 3rd nipple on her, which is a mark of witchcraft. Though a later exam, they couldn't find it. Bridget ran a tavern and dressed flamboyantly in bright red. So this is how we know that she got targeted, which are both considered completely scandalous for a Puritan woman, which is what she was living in at the time. Her independence and her reputation, as many other accused witches, likely sealed her fate. Her case jump-started the tragic cascade of Salem trials. Her trial was one of the first put before the newly created Court of Oya in Salem. So she was under suspicion already for decades prior and had been accused and acquitted before the hysteria really kicked off in 1692. Because she ran a tavern in Salem, her socially visible role made her a more vulnerable target. So we can definitely see that this is a woman who was really in her power and who was probably annoying a lot of people, right? And she wore bright red. Scandalous. Now, our last witch that I want to share with you today is Mother Shipton. Her actual name is Ursula Southiel, but we know her as Mother Shipton. And she is a British woman who is said to have lived between 1486 and 1561 in Yorkshire, England. She's often described as a soothsayer, a cunning woman, and a prophetic figure. She's very much known for her divination. And in her lore, she is said to have been born during a thunderstorm in a cave outside Knaresborough. The legends described her as deformed or ugly in appearance. Over centuries, prophecies attributed her. Sorry, let's redo that one. Okay. So the prophecies attributed to her were often printed after her death, but she actually made some really amazing predictions about the Spanish Armada, the Great Fire of London, and even some modern things that have happened. So very interesting. Her cave in Knaresborough is still a tourist attraction. This is amazing. The water there has such a mineral content that objects placed in the pool or even by the pool, I've heard, will slowly become encrusted. They turn to stone. They literally look petrified. So that was part of the lore of her. She was petrifying people, right? Because the earliest printed collections of her prophecies appeared decades after her death, there is debate about how much is authentic versus how much is later embellishment. So we have links for all of this information, which you will find in our show notes as well.
Exactly. I will add one thing in regards to Mother Shipton. There is this stereotypical image of a witch with the crooked nose and the kind of ghastly witch of Halloween, if you will. That was modeled on Mother Shipton.
That's our girl.
That's the vibe.
Very cool.
Yes.
Sorry, and I know I've confused you here. I'm actually looking at different notes. So that's the end of the witches that I'm chatting about. Our notes just got mixed up here for some reason. So
yeah,
old notes, new notes.
That's all good. So we've got, hang on. We've got, what's the time? 1. Oh,
Sorry, fucking it up.
no, that's fine. You know what I can do? I can. All right, so we're going to go through some known recorded confessions now. So I've got some notes, so I'm going to be looking off to the side here. So we're going to start off with Agnes Sampson. So we pulled this off a catalog, okay? So we'll have the reference for this catalog in our show notes. But she confessed to being in alignment with the devil because he promised her protection, wealth, and vengeance for her and her 3 daughters. She described that the devil appeared in the form of a black dog. Now, if you've read enough, if you've read widely in the subject of witchcraft, you'll know that the witch's devil is often associated to the black dog as one of the animals of representation, right? So we're going to move on to another known confession, and this one is by Isobel Gowdie. Now, the reason why I think Isobel Gowdie is probably one of the most mentioned and most quoted is that she volunteered her testimony. She wandered in to the courthouse or the police station or whatever it was at the time and just gave it up, like properly gave it up. And so this is hers. Isabel Gowdie was Scottish. So if you can imagine this in a Scottish accent, that would be helpful. The 4 confessions she made over a period of 6 weeks included details of charms and rhymes, claims she was a member of a coven in the service of the devil, and that she met with the fairy queen and king. Lurid information concerning carnal dealings with the devil was also provided, a combination of demonic and fairy beliefs. The narratives were used by Margaret Mary, by Margaret Murray. Let's try this again. As the basis for her now mostly discredited theories about cults and witchcraft. And so the thing is, there have been quite a few testimonials and confessions extracted from persecuted witches, and some of them will appear in books on witchcraft as a confirmation of a spell or something like that. That is the issue that I personally take great offense to, because I don't know how you could extract truth from torture, and especially under the conditions. And we'll be talking about the conditions moving forward, so you'll understand what I'm talking about soon.
Absolutely. Now we're going to get into potentially the heaviest part of this episode here. I'm just going to be going through some of how the confessions were extracted from the witches. Okay, so light up your incense, people. Let's go. Okay, so of course there was physical torture to force confessions or to implicate others. So I'm not going to go into detail about these. I don't think we need to. I'll do as much as I have to, and we'll continue on. So the first thing is the rack, which was suspending or hauling people. There was thumb screws, leg screws, or foot screws. So we're crushing limbs and appendages here. Pressing, okay, so heavy weights were placed on top of people. There was one man that was actually killed during the Salem witch trials through pressing. He was just laid with heavy rock and they just crush them till they die. And of course, burning. That is probably the most popular one that we know of there. Now, there were also tests and body inspections and invasive searches which were done on these people. So they would prick for the witch's mark. So this is when they're trying to find areas on the body that aren't sensitive anymore, that can't feel. So often they'll prick moles and things like that. And if the person could not feel it, then they're a witch. And also searching for the witch's teat. So this is extra moles or skin tags or literally anything. We probably all have a witch's teat, right? Somewhere. If someone wanted to find something, they would. So they would be stripped down and people would search them for this quote unquote evidence. Now, there was, of course, a lot of coercive practices and ordeals that these people would have to go through as well. There was the swimming or the dunking test. So accused witches were thrown into the water with a rock attached to them or whatever. If they survived, then they were clearly a witch. If they did not survive, good for them, they weren't. And there was forced confessions under threat, of course, of execution or indefinite imprisonment. These people were thrown away, right? Thrown up and locked away, basically, until they would confess. At times, those people were probably lucky, to be honest, compared to a lot of the other things that could happen. There was also legal coercion. Of course, there was interrogations. These people would be ganged up on at different times. They were not allowed to sleep. So there was all that kind of modern torture technique that we use now, used then as well, but under, as you can imagine, incredibly difficult conditions. And there was also the use of spectral evidence. So this is that spiritual evidence where people are like, oh, I saw a thing, or there was a shadow, or this or that. And that is used as evidence against these people. We have, of course, the psychological and social coercion. So as I mentioned, sleep deprivation, isolation, continuous interrogation, leading questions, coached testimonies, pressure from family, neighbors, public shame obviously was massive at the time, and the forced implication of others. So it was often they were coerced to name many other people as well. So there were people who did that potentially of their own accord, but there are many people who are forced into doing that. And then there's a few other pseudoscientific methods that were used as well. And that is the use of witch cakes or poppets and tests involving animals. So typically a witch cake was baked and given to a dog. And if the dog threw up, that person was a witch. Or if the dog had symptoms of the person who has been witched, then that just confirms everything. Now, the other thing, just a kind of a caveat on all of this, is wherever torture appeared in the witch trial records, the hunts expanded. So people, in my opinion, got a taste for blood, and obviously the forced naming of other people as well, and it just exploded wherever torture was used. So these are just some of the awful ways that people were treated during these hundreds of years, and that their confessions were extracted under such methods, which is why Avalon and I are both like, we have some thoughts about this and some feelings.
Yeah, absolutely. Every part of the world, like the modern witch trial that we are referring to here, not modern, but like this, the nearest time period to us, that 16th, 17th, and 18th century that we're referring to, like they got so creative and so violent, and it seemed to be more geared towards, of course, women, but men were not immune either. And some of it was socio-political, some of it was a land grab. If you accused someone of witchcraft and they were found to be guilty, which, let's face it, there was no one ever let off.
Yeah.
There's not a single case of someone being let off. There is a case of a woman and child being apprehended, and the child got away and the mother did not. But no one was ever found innocent. And yet whatever was left over from the demise of this witch went to the accuser. So it was a great way to get a bit of extra land, wasn't it? So the whole thing is deeply and profoundly disturbing. And my heart goes out to these witches, to these women, some of which were maybe have been witches, but probably many who were not. And to think that actually happened at the hands of like religious fervor is just so unbelievably unsettling to the human spirit. All right, moving on. We're going to talk about the ethics of using confessions, because this is part of the driving force of this episode, is that I personally don't feel comfortable using confession or testimony or extracted under duress confession and testimony in my spellcraft. I don't want that energy anywhere near my magic. And so I wonder if and how you can approach this. So I personally don't need the nasty energy associated with this time period inside my magic. This is something to be hyper aware of as a witch. To know that this happened is absolutely vital to the experience, because there is always danger surrounding witchcraft. At any point in time, witchcraft was illegal once. It could very well be illegal in the future. And so this is why we must be extraordinarily careful with what we do and say. I take a great deal of concern to the accuracy of the information that cannot really be verified. It's giving the history is written by the victor, so they can tell whatever story they want. So the torturer, the inquirer, the person involved in this, in the subjugation of these women, they can say whatever they want. They could say whatever they want. And it's not like they were kept in a clean cell. It's not like they were fed well. It's not like they were cared for or kept warm or anything like that. There are standards to modern prisons, especially in the Western world. Maybe not outside of the Western world, but there is still a standard, whereas back then there was no standard. And so even if you weren't necessarily physically tortured, you were psychologically damaged by just being kept in a filthy, dark, dank cell full of rats. Yes, rats. And so the sad thing is the vast majority of people killed were not witches. Some practiced cunning crafts, while others were still Christian. And yet, these are the same people that confessed under duress to meeting with the devil. And here comes that biggest issue that I have, and that is the concept of the devil, full stop. All of these confessions lead to trysts with the devil appearing as a black dog deals with the devil. Anyone who's done their research on the subject of witchcraft will know that the devil is it's a modern construct, really. It stems from mainstream religion. It stems from that, the evil counterpart to the omnipotent God. And so over the years, witchcraft has adopted this idea of the devil as the lord of the forest, the dark side of human nature, call it what you will. They have adopted that. But that's also about integration and being aware of your shadow self and your light self. And so there's a great many directions in which you can take this conversation. But one thing that I will say is that sensitivity and critical thinking are vital to this conversation. I don't feel comfortable using testimonies. I don't understand why people still do. I don't know if it's disrespectful. I don't know. I'm not answering for anyone else but for myself. But I would never bring the name of someone who had suffered so horrendously into a conversation unnecessarily. These women deserve peace. They deserve rituals for peace, for liberation, for cleansing. They deserve forgiveness, a great deal of forgiveness, especially these Scottish witches that were pushed down the hill in a barrel full of spikes. Like, it's absolutely horrendous. Once you start looking at the torturing techniques that were used, it's just, there's no coming back from that. There is no coming back from that. It was designed to remove life. It was designed to remove life. And so I just don't know how I can personally reconcile the use of this material in my own witches practice comfortably with sensitivity and complete awareness. I don't know how I can do that. If you are listening and you have more of an idea, then by all means share with the community. This is a conversation for the community because it does affect and impact the community. We are all here because we align ourselves to the title of witch, which is a very brave and honorable thing to do considering how dark the witch's history has been. We do so despite knowing that it could mean danger or peril to us. I'm not personally an in-your-face witch. I don't like to shove my witchcraft in people's faces. I don't dress witchy. I can move through my community and no one will ever know. And I do that as a protective mechanism for myself. I do not want to be judged. I want to be left alone to practice my craft in a meaningful way. Behind closed doors, I witchcraft the shit out of everything. Like I have altars everywhere and I have all my witchy paraphernalia behind closed doors. That's my private life. That's my private practice. And only other witches are privy to that side of my life. I don't need the world to understand that. And I don't know, I feel like it's definitely a conversation worth having. And I'd like to know, Alvine, how you feel about this and how you navigate the ethics of using confessional work in your practice, full stop.
I think this is a really great spot to just quickly chat about confession versus testimony, right? because they are two different things. Now, when we were doing our research, both Avalon and I feel that the things shared by Isobel Gowdie could be called a testimony, right? As far as we understand her situation, right? Because we don't know, we weren't there. But it seems that she volunteered, okay? That she went to and said, hey, here's the thing. But of course, remembering the climate of the time, like God knows what was happening in the town, right? But she gave a testimony. Whereas most of the other witches that we've talked about here, and with all the torture devices and all of that, that is extracting confession, right? That is not a, I'm here to give to you of my information. That is, I am going to do anything I can to make the pain stop. So I feel very much the same as you, but really want to be sensitive, because I do know a lot of other witches, as far as I understand, a lot of other witches do practice with these kinds of things in their practice. So we really want to hear from you guys, your thoughts, your feelings, and how you do, if you do work with these witches or with witch trial, confessions, or testimony. Now, I've had a think over this time about how one might work with accused witches. I will say for myself, I don't feel comfortable with the idea at this time. This has been a really interesting thought experiment, just to try it on and go, okay, and really feel out how I feel about it. But I'm still at the point, I'm not interested in having that energy in my practice personally. However, I've come up with a few ways that maybe this could be done that might be interesting for some people. So you could select a specific witch that has been throughout the witch trials and call on her as a spiritual archetype. So you can work with her in a more of a spiritual aspect to gain strength, to gain courage, whatever it might be based on her particular story. This would be how I would think of working with saints, right? Because saints are canonized based on how they die, which is lovely.
And how they suffered as well.
And how they suffered, correct. So in that same way, you could work with the witches, which I think is probably how a lot of people do it. You could also work with them for defiance, right? If there was something that you were like wanting to be like, no, like this is what I'm doing, this is whatever, you could call them into that kind of spell. Again, looking at the specific witch, I would go for one maybe more like Isobel Gowdie in that regard. Now, ancestrally, you can call on them for their different powers. So we had Mother Shipton, who was quite known for her prophetic gifts. So you could call her as a spiritual teacher, perhaps. This is getting into kind of rude concepts here, or quite sort of new agey stuff. But you could call on her in that way, work with her to increase that power, right? That's just one example. You can also trace the spiritual lineage of witch blood, right? So some people might actually have ancestry of people who were in the witch trials. I'm pretty sure I saw someone that I follow recently actually say that. But we're talking about archetypes here. So we haven't done our ancestor episode yet, but ancestors do not have to be like actually related to you. So you could work with them in this more conceptual idea here. Now, you could also, with the ancestors, use them for justice spells, ancestral justice spells, right? Or rather more for the witches who were in the trials themselves. So this is a little bit what Avalon mentioned before, for the cleansing, for healing. You can offer libations or smoke offerings to them, to the accused, and do magic for restoration of the collective memory of witches or that lineage of witch. These are some ideas that you could play with. Now, you can also work with the accused witches as a reflection, right? Not to get caught in mob mentality. I have such feelings about this. In my opinion, I think we've shifted a little bit that way in the West over the last few years. There has been this, I think cancel culture is obviously a drop in the bucket compared to witch trials, right? But it's that same kind of energy. It's the start of that energy. So there is a lot of this going on in the world right now, us versus them, and the temperature is rising. And as a witch, this makes me incredibly uncomfortable because of what we talked about in the past. And we can see a lot of religious clashing going on now. I think this comes down to values. Different people of different religious persuasion have different values. That's ultimately the issue. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out. But this is something we can bring for ourselves. How are we being the mob? You could scry into a black mirror and ask, where does the mob still live in me? And work to transmute that judgment into discernment. Because here is the thing, when you are in the group mind, you may think that you're super smart and using your brain, but I can tell you're not. It's just like you're working at that point on emotion, right? And pulsing with the group. And it's just such a dangerous place to be. We can see these awful things that happen to these people in the witch trials. And we're like, how on earth could anyone ever do this stuff to anybody? But you get that fire in the mob and humans turn very dark. The other thing you could work with them for is baneful magic, of course, if you wanted to go hard to capture someone, so that someone is caught, to imprison someone, to torture someone. We're not going to go into the details of that. But there was a lovely little candle ritual idea that you shared, Avalon, when we were doing our research. I don't know if you remember it. I wanted to share that with us.
Sure. I would say work a nice fat pillar for this one, and it has to be white. White for purity, white for cleansing, white for peace, white for forgiveness, white candle. You can also use a black candle for the eradication of suffering, for the removal of these blocks, for the removal of this pain, and for the removal of things. So either one of those two colors would be right. Both of them together would be fucking banger. I would carve up my candles appropriately, the black and the white appropriately. And I would really carve the names of these witches that are known to me, that I feel quite connected to the story of, and carve that onto the candle, anoint it with a good peace oil, or even a good, I have this one here. This is called the Master Key Voodoo Oil.
Oh, lovely.
I would use the Master Key Voodoo Oil for this kind of work, because it's incredibly eradicating. It opens and clears, and oh, it's so good. But a good road opener, a good healing oil, and then I would anoint, or I would roll it, dress it with the oil and the appropriate herbs. Now, an uncrossing herb like agrimony would be good. A clarifying holy herb like frankincense would also be very good. Hyssop would be very good. Myrrh would be very good, because myrrh for spirit communication is incredibly important. And then a flower, something like lavender for peace. And I would roll it up and I would light it and I would let it burn. And I would create a yearly kind of ritual out of this. Pick a day, pick a time, that every year you repeat this ritual. Because it creates like the Maharaja effect. The more people pouring into this peace ritual, this release of this tortured spirit energy, which I can't imagine it would be anything else, right? These women that have been men and women that have been so very tortured and victimized all this time, like the removal of that heavy, the dark side of the human spirit energy is hard to shift. They did something very similar here in Tasmania at Port Arthur. So Port Arthur was the place of a massacre. And it was also a tortured place because of the convicts and the situation that took place in Port Arthur. So Google it if you're not from Australia. The Port Arthur has always had that heavy feeling. And people as young as 12 ended up in Port Arthur because they stole a loaf of bread because they were starving, but they were considered heinous criminals. So the treatment of humans back in the day was just abhorrent, to say the least. And so in order to remove that, if you work every year, you will absolutely start to shift some of that energy. And that's what they've done at Port Arthur. Every year, I was told this by one of the employees that works there, and a coven witch as well. She said that I think it's a group of monks, forgive me if I'm mistelling this story, but a group of monks comes in, they sing and they pray the harmony to come back. They do this once a year, and they have been doing this once a year. When I first went to Port Arthur, I was 20 years old and I couldn't walk through the gates. I'm too sensitive for that shit. When I came back many years later, almost 20 years later, I walked in there and the vibe was vastly different. And so I can physically feel the difference that work has made. And so with this witch's candle spell, it might be a little, might seem a little weak to start off with, but it's the repetition by which we do these types of things, the ritual aspect through which we do these practices that is important. Now, if you're thinking, is it poor form to light a candle for people that burned at the stake? It's a psychological conundrum, really. We light the candle to guide the spirit. We're not reburning witches. We're lighting the candle to guide the spirit, to give a light to the spirit of these departed people, these departed souls. But if you feel incredibly bad for it, then my alternative option for you would be to plant white roses and to make a blessing bath once a year to water your white roses. And you can bury in the soil of that white rose bush, whether you do this in the pot or in the earth, the names of these witches. You can place crystals in the earth around it. And you can do both these things. You can light the candle and you can do the rose bush. But we do white roses because you can then pluck the white rose and use it as a spirit bath for peace and cleansing and calming your electromagnetic field, your etheric body. And so there's a multitude of practices that one can do here.
Love that.
Yeah. I do have a few more things to say because I did a brain dump. I had a really hard time with this one. I think both Alvine and I, we actually did struggle with this one, not because we couldn't find the information, but because we could find the information.
Yeah, that's don't tell us about it, please.
Found. I'm like, how hard will this be to find? There are actual websites with the physical scans of these confession pages, and they've put them in an academic format, and you can just play, and it's a spoken word kind of thing, so it can be explained to you, but you can actually see the physical handwriting on the old parchment. It's
amazing.
A full scan. Holy moly. And so when you actually, it's one thing to see it written in Wikipedia. It's quite another to see it written on a piece of parchment and go, what the actual fuck? So here's what I have to say, so bear with me because this might take a minute. The witch hunt and trials took place in a world that lived in fear and wonder. This was a time where a natural and supernatural experience was deeply blurred into the lines. This was a time in human history where things like illness and failing crops were a profound tragedy and oftentimes perceived as inexplicable. It was also during these same dark times that the figure of the witch became a vessel of communal fear. Another issue that bothers me is that the women and also men lived lives marked with vulnerability. Records showed that the accused were frequently those on the edges of their community, the elderly, the poor, the widowed, the healers, or those who simply lived a little differently. This time period, with all its consuming darkness, leads me to feel that a profound human tendency to distrust the unfamiliar, as well as the horrific cost paid by those who did not fit neatly into the social fabric of its time. The central horror of the trials was a cruel paradox of the confession. To maintain their innocence often meant enduring unimaginable pain until death finally claimed them. To confess, even falsely, was often the only path to a swift execution and the salvation of their soul. When we read transcripts of confessions, of dark Sabbaths and pacts with the devil, I feel I must listen with compassionate ears. These to me are not descriptions of reality, but more narratives born from the exhaustion, terror, and the leading question of their accusers. They feel to me like the language of shattered psyches, a desperate attempt to give interrogators what they wanted in the hopes that their suffering would end. I feel it's also incredibly important to remember the people and not the archetypes. It's a sacred duty to recall that each name on the trial records was a full, complex human being. They were mothers, daughters, neighbors, and friends, with lives, loves, and stories of their own. To reduce them to a single label, which is to continue the violence that erased them. Alvine and I spent days reading through historical transcripts and thought all the accused who callously lost their lives were really only one who stood out as a genuine witch. And that, I believe, was Bridget Bishop. And so I had a really hard time with this one, a really hard time, because I just felt so sad. It's so unbelievably sad to think that I could have been one of these women. I could have been one of these accused. I like to play in the garden. I like to research my finds and wild harvest and practice a little herbal medicine from time to time. I could be one. I live on the fringe in my own town. I live in a cottage off grid on a large property and I grow my own food and I live off solar. I could be one of these hedge people. And so I feel very personally connected to these stories, as I think many witches do. How can you not? How can you not?
Absolutely. It's an important thing to think about, reflect upon. I think learning about our own, I was going to say history, but it's not history. It's is it etymology of the word that we carry, right? It's a little different. Although some people take it on historically, which we've obviously spoken about today, but I think it's something that we can't help but think about. And it is something as a public witch that I always have on my mind. You mentioned earlier that witchcraft was illegal in Western countries. It was illegal in Australia not that long ago, like a few decades ago. Some of you may be familiar with Crimson Fire, who used to spend quite a bit of time online. She was part of getting that shit overturned. She's not that old. It's wild. So this stuff is still not that far in the distant past. And yeah, I just think, I don't know, being public and the way so many of us are, you don't have to have a YouTube channel, whatever, you're posting on Instagram. It's something that we should all be thinking about, reflecting upon. And I don't know, what I've taken from all this is, as corny as it sounds, just trying to make my little part of the world better. Mob mentality is something that really scares me. And I would love for us to be behaving as individuals and judging others based on their individual merits rather than blanket accusing.
Yeah. The whole who do we hate today kind of vibe.
Yeah.
I think that brings that collective energy quite well. And honestly, the thing that upsets me the most about this is the depth of human cruelty.
Yes. Horrifying.
Under the banner of religion.
In the name of God.
In the name of God. It's the depth of cruelty. It's absolutely the perversion and the depth of cruelty that just fucking blows my mind. I thought that I knew. Starting out this, I thought that I knew about the witch trials. I knew about the methods of extraction. I have been around witchcraft my whole life. And information about the witch trial, the resurgence of the witch trials, come up almost seasonally, right? They are something that gets revisited over and over again. And I thought that I knew. And honestly, there is so much to dig through that I did not know. I'm very comfortable to say that this was a huge kind of information gap in my witchcraft kind of knowledge base. Now I am acutely aware. And I am more horrified than ever. And I feel like there is some measure of personal safety that I need to take. I feel very tainted by this personally myself as someone who operates under the banner of witch. I self-identify as a witch My siblings self-identify as a witch. My daughter likes to say that she's a little witch. And I look at that and I think it's both beautiful and utterly terrifying all at the same time. I think any person who is brave enough to take up the mantle of witchcraft is an incredibly brave human being. And it's impossible to really take up the mantle of witchcraft without understanding its history. And this is its darkest history right here.
Yeah.
There's also an enormous amount of light and good and creation and spiritual evolution that is associated with witchcraft. And so I don't just want this episode to be about the dark and the down. I want you to understand that from this, these are the ashes from which modern witches have risen, essentially. So you and I, we practice a craft openly now that has risen from these ashes. And so it's really important to understand the history of it. These are your ancestors. If you identify as witch, then these are your ancestors in a very open and liberal sense, because they are connected to you through that one word. That one word has so much heat attached to it. So there we have it.
There we have it. We would like to ask you again, if you have any wonderful resources on this topic, please do share them as a cornerstone for others in the community looking for this kind of information. We've only, like we said, barely scratched the surface today of what is there. So if this has awoken something in you, a positive feeling or perhaps a negative feeling, maybe it is a little path to explore and go down and see what you discover.
Exactly. Yes. Do your research. Critical thinking is vital to the experience.
Absolutely. All right, wonderful witches. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you have been burning up a storm with all the wonderful witchy smoke where you're at. This has been the Broken Pentacle podcast, and we will see you next time for more magic. Bye.
Bye.
We don't chant.